Yeah, we're live. Tonight we're talking about turbo manifolds, more specifically, ProCharge Mopar's first one here in the house. I like it. We're talking about turbo manifolds, more specifically the Dodge 360 Magnum. The testing I just ran. If you guys haven't seen it, take a look. Take a look at the video that I have up where I just posted. We did the very part one, basically the first part, kind of what it took to get the Dodge Magnum from the wrecking yard and everything that we had to go through to get it ready and get it tested and find out if the thing even worked and even ran. That's one of the things that I covered in the video, is that we go through all of this stuff. And sure, we try to take, because we're trying to find out whether or not the thing is a good motor, whether it's going to run, whether it has problems. It could have broken lifters or rods or all kinds of things. I mean, we go through a series of tests, obviously, before we put it up on the dyno, to try to hope that it's going to work. In this case, we actually did a leak down test on it before I put it on. In the past, I've just put the motor up there and hope for the best. And that doesn't always work out. And it's much better time-wise for me to at least do pre-gaming so that we know going up that it's going to work, better than it not working at all, basically. So doing a leak down test is a good idea. And then we know that when we put it up there and we can spin it over, that we also check to make sure that it has oil pressure, which is another good test. When we can spin it over, also we can do a cranking compression test, although rarely does that tell us anything that the leak down test didn't already tell us. So then we have to make sure that obviously the other things in the motor are okay. But once we do those, usually it's pretty good. But even if it turns out, like in this case, it did, this motor actually runs fairly good. I was very happy. If you guys haven't seen, I was very happy with the results. This thing made like 288 horsepower. And let's see, where are we at? 386 or 87 foot-pounds of torque, showing that the KEGGER manifold, the long runner KEGGER manifold, is definitely designed for low speed torque. I mean, the thing made peak power at 4,300 and peak torque at 3,200. So it's definitely designed for grunt. But I showed you everything that was required to make the thing work. And it's a lot. One of the things I did was take all of the injectors out and flowed them to make sure that they, a lot of times if they've been sitting for a while, especially, some of them will get dirty and get clogged. And so you want to make sure that they're still going to work. So luckily, Westech has an ASNU injector machine, and we put them on there. Before I did that, I cleaned them, then we flowed them, and they all seem to be, fairly even and happy. Also, it kind of tells me what the flow rate of the injector is, and it gives us an idea how much power we can ultimately make from them before we have to upgrade them. And we're probably going to upgrade them anyway, especially if and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is adding boost to this motor and what we think we need to make that work. So we're obviously, one of the things is going to be injectors. But injectors, in this case, we're also talking about the exhaust manifolds in relation to how we can make these work on a turbo application. But hooking the stock exhaust manifolds up, even just to get it running, we basically had to make our own exhaust after the stock exhaust manifolds. With the headers, it wasn't as big of a problem because it just had a collector extension on it. And you'll be seeing the header test in part 2 of this, along with some nitrous that we ran on it, because it's, a lot of these things are time sensitive in the testing that we can get done. We have this amount of time that we have on the dyno that we can run stuff. And depending on how it goes, and it doesn't always go exactly right, just getting the motor up there took, doing all the stuff to make it work took hours and hours and hours. So sometimes you have very little actual dyno time to get things done. So we do what we can with the limited amount of time that we have. And so we were able to get a header test done, a nitrous test done, and then we'll come back and do other things like hopefully cylinder heads and camshafts and intake manifolds. I did have a carbureted dual plane intake manifold that I was hoping to run, but again, limited amount of time. But that's definitely on the list for something that I want to do when we go back. And also boost might be, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. But the motor ran good once we got the fuel injection working. And again, thanks to Ish and Eric for helping out and making that stuff all work. Once we got it, then once you get it running and it's cooperating, then there's, it's just a matter of, putting in the right amount of fuel and the right amount of timing and stuff. And we did timing sweeps on this. And in this case, we started out at 25 degrees. And that actually turned out to be very close to what it wanted to be. I thought that was going to be starting on the low side, given the cylinder head that's on there. But as it turned out, it didn't seem to want too much more than that. Now, also, if you took a look at this, you saw that the way that I locked the distributor was not optimum. It worked, but it was not by any means. And so there's in those distributors and the way that they drive them, there's always a little bit of slop. There's a little bit of play between the distributor gear and the gear, the drive gear. And so there, there's variation, a little bit of variation in what the timing can actually be. And then the way that I locked it, there's probably also, a degree or two. And it's not a big deal for us on the engine dyno, only because we're starting out low and then we're changing the timing, we're adding timing till we get to the point where it doesn't want to make any more power. So I don't really care what that number is, but we know that we're starting out low and that we get higher. But starting out where we started out, we only gained power by adding about 2 degrees. When we went beyond that, it didn't seem to be any responsive at all to changes in timing. So we stopped there. Air fuel's easy. We add and subtract fuel and it does what it's supposed to do. So all of that worked out very well. And this thing made good power. I mean, it made good torque. And it actually, as you guys will see when I put the video up, and I'm gonna hopefully be editing that tonight, when you see what it did with the headers helped make power. And then so obviously did the nitrous. Now I want to see changes in the KEGGER manifold. We want to do the I'm calling them plenum stuffers, or they reduce the plenum volume. So we want to try that. We want to try some of the other mods where they change the length of the runners. They cut off the end section basically of the runner and change the runner length, although it's not by a dramatic amount. But I'd like to see, because I really like induction theory, and I'd like to see what works on this particular one. I'd also like to see more flow going into the KEGGER manifold, so we may modify that, or may get another one from the wrecking yard. The one that I have is divided, and I think that they have a non-divided one, so we can do modifications to both those. I'd like to see a difference just between those two, between the divided plenum and the non-divided plenum. One of the reasons that I had to do the nitrous the way that I did, and you'll see that in the nitrous video, is that I have a divided plenum, and we wanted to make sure that we had a roughly equal amount of nitrous going to both sides of the 2-hole throttle body and the divider in the middle. So subsequently to both sides of the plenum. Now, when we ran the nitrous, and you guys, again, you'll see that coming up, but we didn't run fuel. We just ran a dry setup. Basically, I had a wet fogger nozzle, but we only ran nitrous through it. And then we added the fuel with the injectors, which was fairly easy to do with a Holley HP management system. All of that worked out very well. So I would like to run some Engine Quest heads on this thing. I would like to do some mild cams, whatever will fit in the stock piston, the piston to valve clearance issue, whatever will fit there would be good. I'm thinking, like a 224, 232 kind of cam thing. Obviously springs will be necessary. This thing seemed to rev fine and I didn't notice valve float. We didn't see evidence of that in the dyno curves. When you see valve float, it's a dramatic, it's like, we call it a geometric drop off. It's going nice and it goes, it takes a big jump down. And if you have an air hat on it, you can definitely see it. And speaking of that, when we were running this thing initially in this video, you'll see there are photos of the thing with an air hat. And the air hat, we tried it to see if it would do anything. I didn't think it would, because of where the holes are relative to where the entry is from the air hat, and it didn't really affect power at all. But that's the air hat that I did my Big Bang Theory or my Wheel of Death thing, and where we introduced 5 gallons of water into a motor to hydrolock it. And by the way, that stops the motor instantly. It's pretty exciting. But I want to try, I'd like to try maybe either an adapter to run a 2-barrel Holley or a 4-barrel or something like that. I could stack them together like I did on the 6-cylinder and put a Dominator carburetor on there. We could hog it out and put a mono blade like that we use on the Shelby's and stuff like that. So there are a lot of options there. Ultimately, we'd get rid of that and then put another kind of, I know that they make a 2-barrel fuel injected M1 intake manifold for it. I'd like to just put a dual plane carbureted manifold on it, because I think that if a guy was putting that motor in something other than the vehicle it came out of, and he was swapping that into something like taking a Magnum and swapping it in an early Duster or Challenger or something like that, or an early truck, probably would put it in carbureted anyway. So a dual plane with a carburetor is always a good choice, especially for any kind of street motor. and you can make pretty good power. And I talked to Dulcich about a few different possible combinations that I might be able to borrow or something. And so we'll see how that goes. But there are lots of cams available for them. And like I said, I want to do the KEGGER mod. But what we're going to talk about tonight is the exhaust manifold that I have up in the thumbnail and what you guys think about using that, because putting a long tube header in place of that is definitely worth power. We know that. But if we reverse that manifold, which I think we can, I don't remember there being anything that would stop from a fitment standpoint in the front. I'll have to take a close look at that. I didn't actually flip them around to see what it was. If I flip the manifolds around and make a Y pipe like I run with the LS stuff, then we could do a single turbo. So my question is, one, do you think that the exhaust manifolds will work fairly well for that, knowing what we know about turbos? And what do you think about the KEGGER manifold? I know that I'm going to have to probably look out for, and we should take the KEGGER manifold off before we do the boost anyway. I just want to check the lower plate and make sure that it's secure and sealed and that it's actually strong enough to take boost. Now, if it's strong enough to take the hard vacuum under decel, I would think it probably would take the boost. That wouldn't be a problem. I've run tests like that before, and usually I had manifolds that I made with lots of unsupported surface area. I've had them crack. We had welded it together. This is back when I did way back when I had my 5-liter Mustang, and we made an intercooled manifold. So what I did is made an upper manifold that bolted to a GT40 lower, and then it had tubes. It had a flange and tubes coming up into a plenum, and the plenum was about this thick. And then I had an intercooler core and then another plenum on top of that. And then the air went into the upper plenum and then down into the intercooler core and into the lower one and then into the short runner section. We just wanted to run that intercooler with, if in our case, we were running a Vortex supercharger on it. But if you were running a turbo or any kind of forced induction, we wanted to have something that would kind of fit under the hood. And I remember making that, and the plenums, the plenums on the top and bottom portion of the intercooler core were big enough that, and we didn't ever do it under boost, but it would leak under boost, but it cracked under a heavy decel, because on a heavy decel, you can get, 25 inches of vacuum on there, and it cracked some of the welds. And we found out that it cracked the welds. The car would start up and it would run. It actually run fairly good. But when we tried to go into boost, the weld would separate, and then it would leak boost out, and the thing just wouldn't make the power that it used to make. I'm like, wow, this manifold just turned out terrible. And then we figured out what it was. And then what I ended up doing is I call it posting it. So we just put posts inside the plenum and to support the plenum on the inside. And since the plenum is not really flowing very much or anything, the way that it was configured, it just solved that problem with the thing deflecting so much. And then it worked out okay. It worked like a short runner manifold, like we would expect. But on the KEGGER, I want to make sure that lower plate is, if we have to make a stiffer one, we can. Obviously, we can make it out of thicker material. We can just copy the pattern and cut it out. That wouldn't be hard. We could mill that out or whatever, or just buy one if somebody has a thicker plate available for it already. Or maybe the stock one will work if we just put the right size bolts and washers and maybe support braces going across it. There might be an easy fix, something easier than making a whole new one. But we want to make sure that is sealed, and then we'll blow into the 2-barrel throttle body into the manifold and see what happens. And it will be good to show people that if we run that manifold and we run boost on it, it's probably going to do the same thing that it does NA, because they almost always do that. And I guess my question is, on the stock exhaust manifolds, do you think that we'll see a big restriction there and that will limit our power production on this Dodge 360? I honestly don't think it'll be too bad. I have seen, somebody has been sending me photos and stuff. Apparently there are 2 different exhaust manifolds, and this might be an interesting test because we can monitor back pressure doing that. There are 2 different exhaust manifolds, and one of them has a bigger opening. It has a bigger exit side on the exhaust, and so it should theoretically flow more and make more power. And it might be a good test for me to do and run that and see if it makes more power. If one of them, the bigger flowing one, makes more power than the other one does. We know that the headers do, but the headers do not because they flow more. They do more because of scavenging. The exhaust manifold with a bigger opening is not going to provide scavenging. It's just going to flow more. So it'll be a separate kind of test. And it would kind of be interesting if it flows better to decide which one we need to use, to run the turbo on. Because in this application, if we're talking about something that's, 300 horsepower or so, and we're adding boost to it, at 14 pounds, we should expect 600 horsepower. That's not a lot of power. And we have lots of turbo choices to make that kind of power. And honestly, even if we had a little bit of back pressure, which we probably will on a turbo that's sized to only make that amount of power on a motor that's this big, I'm kind of expecting, like on a GT45-ish type turbo, that we probably will see, a fair amount of back pressure. So it'll be interesting to find out. The Nova needs the 4200. Yeah, 3800. The 3800, and I can give you an update on that as well, because I think we've covered everything on the turbo manifolds that I wanted to cover. I'm looking forward to making that because it'll be fairly easy. It's just 2 flanges and then the exhaust pipes, and then we just make a Y basically. And I'll do the same thing I did with the LS. We'll do a Y into a 3-inch V-band, and then I can mount all the turbo stuff that I have. We can mount any turbo on it that we want. We can any T4 or T6 turbo. We wouldn't use it. We wouldn't ever use a T3, even on a 300 horsepower 360. We probably would never run a T3 on it, but a T4 and a T6 will be right in the wheelhouse. So somebody was asking about the 3800. Here's an update on the 3800. We were actually going to run that while I was down. We got the bell housing for it, and I thought that solved all the problems. As it turned out, it didn't. We had the bell housing, we had a drive plate for it, and the drive plate that we had, and I also had a flywheel, so we could bolt the drive plate to the flywheel. But the problem is the drive plate that we had, the center section of the drive plate that Westech has, was broken. So they had to order a new center section for the drive plate. And it happens. Their steel was sprung. If you know what the center section of a clutch looks like, it's a lot like that. And then what happens is from moving around, it broke that center section. So we haven't used that one in a really long time that I can remember. And so it's not, it was not happy because there's only one. The small diameter drive plate that we're using to match the small diameter flywheel requires a small diameter center section for the drive plate, and there's only one of those, and it turned out to be not usable. So they've ordered that and taken care of it. Now hopefully we can get it up there and run. Unfortunately for me, and I think I did this in a video, that I got I set everything up to run it with the flex plate, and I had it all set up to run the bigger drive plate that we have, but the bigger drive plate won't fit in the very small bell housing, as it turns out. So I was all psyched about ready to run the 3800 and run boost on it and do that. And then I had to actually switch gears to run the Magnum. And, with my fingers crossed the whole time, hoping that the Magnum was a runner, because all I knew is that we got it from the wrecking yard and that I had it on the stand. And so as it turned out, it's a good little runner. It wants to play. So, which is good. So let's see what else you got. What do you guys got going on? I've got a Mercruiser manifold from John Lingenfelter. My favorite 5-liter manifold was the TFX Box R. I like the BXR, but it was stupid price and didn't make any more power. I want to see, Aaron wants to see a back-to-back on a 94 Plus and a 92, 93. Oh, that's the exhaust manifolds you're talking about, Aaron? Don, what motor is the Mercruiser manifold for? Are the primaries on the stock he's talking about the same? I don't know what that is. Foreign automobiles, the large outlet on the manifolds are not only larger at the outlet, but throughout so the whole manifold is bigger, you're saying. So that bodes well for power production. Dukes, we've run, as a matter of fact, the first 2 Big Bang motors that I ran, and I think that we changed over on the 6-liter, on the Gen 3 6-liter. But at least the first 2 Big Bang motors were run with JBA shorty headers feeding the 2 turbos, and that works fine too. Banks, your 496 with 10.5 to 1 compression is dieseling for some reason. I would check the timing. I would check to see what the timing curve is on the distributor. You might have too much initial advance and not enough active advance. You may have to curve the distributor. You should bring a Nova to the duct tape drags. I don't think that there's enough duct tape to get it running. Do a single-sided turbo setup. I did that. I tried that on a big block and was not able to get the turbo to spool up. But I do want to try that again, though. Hey, Richard, I saw there's an LSXR 102 millimeter intake. That's a rectangular port. Is this going to gain any horsepower on a rectangular port 6-liter? No, it's not. Just if you run the stock LS3 intake manifold, it's going to be everything that you need. I wouldn't spend money on a fast rec port manifold. I definitely would on a cathedral port application, but not on the rec port application. James, what's up? Gonna do heads, cam, and intake on the Magnum. Yeah, we will probably test that stuff. I looked through your videos and couldn't find anything short, straight runner versus long tube headers on a turbo application. I have only done that on a Honda B series. Have you decided on the Nova engine yet? The only thing I've decided on the Nova is that I would like to get it running. I haven't had a chance to look at the most recent video with the Magnum. The video is about me getting it running on the dyno, all the stuff that we had to do to make it work. Your initial is 28? That seems like a lot. Dukes, I'm still learning the timing curve on my 5.9 Magnum right now. Made my 68 dart run 10.4 in the 8th. Nice. When we did the timing, what we did, we started out with 25 everywhere from 2,000 RPM all the way out to 6,000 RPM. We didn't ever run it that high, but we started there, and then I started adjusting it. We went up in timing, we went to 27, and we didn't see any power gain down low. We did see a little bit of a power gain at the top. So what we did was go the opposite way down low and said, okay, it didn't do anything in this RPM range. So 25 was enough. Now let's see if 23 is still enough, because I want to run as little timing as I can and still make the same power. And as it turned out, when we went down to 23, down low in the RPM range, it didn't change power at all either. So we just kept going until we lost power. And 23 seemed to down low seemed to be the range. So we started at 23 and ended at 27-ish. We tried 28 and it kind of made the same power. So we turned it back down to 27. So that was the range. And we were running from 2,500 to 5,500, I think. That was the range of our wide open throttle timing for the Magnum. The 2.2 I have is being rebuilt right now, and then the 2.5 needs to come out of the Omni. Can you run a turbo setup with a cold side not hooked up due to driveline testing? The problem is if you don't hook the turbo up, it doesn't make any boost. and then it doesn't provide power to the motor, and then it doesn't provide exhaust flow to the turbo, and there's no cyclical effect going on there. If you just have the turbo blow air, it won't actually do that because it will only spool as much as the NA power output. I've set of Magnum shorty headers. I'm willing to donate if you pay the shipping. I also have an M1 two-barrel Magnum single plane intake. Joe, is that an EFI manifold, or is it a carbureted manifold? Yeah, and Andy's right. You can check on your timing curve, check and make sure that it's not idling too high. And then where do you have is it a vacuum advance distributor, or is it just centrifugal advance? There's lots of questions there. Is there plans for the Uncle Tony myth busting video? I don't know what myth busting you're talking about. Maybe you're talking about the piston flipping, and I'm definitely going to do that. Has there been any test on the horsepower limit of a 5.9 engine? I don't know what the limit is. I want to see a 3800 with twins, 2 rear front-wheel drive exhaust manifolds, and some wastegates put on with different intake configurations. Keith, with the Magnum not wanting a lot of timing NA, how do you think it will react to boost? I'll just go down from there. We'll just use that as the NA numbers, and then we'll reduce it under boost. Does a long runner manifold with enough cross-sectional area not support power at higher RPM? It won't. It has nothing to do. You could make the cross-section 9 feet in diameter. It's not a cross-section problem, although that can help it a little bit. But the reflected wave still has to travel the same distance. So you're going to get improved cylinder filling from the reflected wave at the same RPM, and it's based on runner length, because the reflected wave has to travel up and back, and that takes a certain period of time because the wave travels at the speed of sound. There's also some time delay out at the end where rarefaction or rarefaction occurs. So all that's just time. It's just time-based, and that's going to determine RPM and when that positive pressure wave runs into the open, past the open valve, and improves cylinder filling. And it won't do it so it's not a flow thing. And that's a problem that a lot of guys have, is they don't understand, I need to port it so it'll make power on the top. The Magnum manifold, the beer keg manifold, with the runner length that it has, no matter how much you port it, is not going to make power at high RPM. The runner length is just too long. Yes, everyone's right talking about if you didn't hook up the turbo, it's going to overspeed the turbo. Kobo, yes, the 750 blow-through carburetor from Kevin. He does good stuff over there. Small block Chevy, Mercruiser, tunnel ram, TPI intake in the 90s with the big block top, I believe, with a twin blade throttle body. Filters were experimenting. So it's a small block Chevy, tunnel ram-ish with a. So Don, does it look like the Holley stealth ram kind of? Not for downtowners. Inspired by you, I'm doing a blow through Gen 1 small block 350, stock 350 gap rings, quick fuel, carb, stock distributor. My plan is to lock the HEI and pull timing. The problem with locking the distributor for a street car is that it makes it for hard starting, and you have probably too much timing down low. We used to run the what were they called? The ones where you could retard timing under boost, and then you had a little adjustment knob, boost timing retards. That's what they were called. And for distributor applications, those worked pretty well. Are you going to experiment with the plenum volume? I'd like to put in I've seen the inserts where they change the plenum volume on the KEGGER. Now, I haven't done the Keglodon and not seeing any change in power. I'm skeptical, but I will try it. The one thing I do want to do is I want to take off a lot more runner length. The guys that are cutting them and taking off an inch or an inch and a half or 2 inches maybe, and they're even angle cutting it, so they're not taking off the whole thing. I want to cut I think if a guy wants to change the runner length, you need to cut it in half or 2/3 of it at least and get rid of a bunch of it. And that'd be interesting, even as a gee whiz thing, so that we could show, hey, look, when we change it by 4, 6, or 8 inches, that here's what happens. We kind of know based on previous testing, but it's always cool to see, though. Thoughts on drivability or tuning concerns on having an external wastegate prior to the merge on a cast log type manifold? Like on between cylinders when merge is on the opposite side. You can have the wastegate anywhere in the exhaust setup before the turbo, obviously. There are situations where it's not ideal. Like if you take a look at, if anybody remembers the old Honda drag manifolds, the wastegate was on, it was a cast manifold, and the wastegate was, they had a flange cast into the manifold, and they had the wastegate right there. It's great for packaging and it looks cool. Unfortunately, it was only wastegating 2 of the runners. And so it had very poor boost control. So you want to make sure that you have the wastegate where you'll have proper boost control. Do they make aftermarket Magnum intakes? Yes, they do. When I pulled the pistons out of the holes on my RV 440 and gap for boost, would you agree 36 to 38? That seems like a lot, but 6.5, 7.5 thousandths per inch of bore is kind of the rule. Speedmaster Assault dual plane on the 650 on my 318 with a 1-inch spacer on it. The 5.9 timing chain definitely stretched out. That wouldn't surprise me. I don't even know how many miles this thing had on it. Redrill the heads and use LA intakes. That's great, except that if I put any other heads, I got to redrill those heads too. Kind of looks like a carb tunnel ram. Yeah, that's what the stealth ram looks like. The stealth ram is a tunnel ram. It's basically the YN tunnel ram, but with a box on top of it, and then it has a front mount for the 2-hole, tune port throttle body. Richard, you must go online and purchase a $100 ported stock throttle body. Nice guy. You purchase and then send your core back. Huge low increase speed density. Okay, Alan, I'm gonna tell you why you won't get a low speed power increase from any ported throttle body, because that's not what throttle bodies do. Low speed power comes from other things. In every throttle body test I've ever done, and I've done hundreds, on stock NA motors, stock motors, supercharged motors, turbocharged motors, all of them. And a throttle body is just an air door. So if the throttle body, first of all, the only way the throttle body adds power is if the throttle body itself is a restriction. And if it is a restriction, it's not a restriction at lower engine speeds. The big throttle body, if it has enough to support, let's say 400 horsepower, and the motor down at 2,500 is only making 200 horsepower, it has enough to support that airflow. So there's more than enough airflow. So if you put a ported one on there, you're not going to gain anything down there. When you get gains from a throttle body, it's almost always, and I've never seen it scientifically measured to show me otherwise that it did anything else. But what you have is, from a throttle body, you have like increasing gains as you go out in engine speed, because the more airflow the motor needs, the more restrictive a stock throttle body can become. And then the greater the gains you get from a bigger throttle body or a ported throttle body. I've never seen low speed gains from any kind of bigger throttle opening, other than on possibly a positive displacement supercharged application. Yeah, Banks, that would be my suggestion. I mean, listen to what they're talking about on the transfer slot. You got to make sure that the carburetor's right. You got to make sure that the idle speed is right. But barring that, you don't want a lot of, you want the correct amount of total advance, but you need the balance between centrifugal advance and initial advance. And usually it's less initial advance and then more centrifugal advance. Patrick, I'm running a 318 Magnum that's mostly stock, comp shelf cam, springs, 80-pound injectors on E85, GT45 turbo, non-air-cooled, been 121. Nice. So that's making power. But that's because it's a 318, and we all know that 318s make more power than any motor ever conceived by man. Don, I'll go ahead and put my email up here again. So are you saying that runner cross-sectional area does matter? The size of the runner matters, but that doesn't determine effective RPM range nearly as much as the runner length does. We're not holding the intergalactic KEGGER down here. Yes, Agent J and Agent K. Just bought myself a 96 Civic 1.4. It's struggling to build fuel pressure at startup. Any ideas? Check valve in the pump or fuel pressure regulator on the fuel? I'd check both of those. I'm not familiar with a 1.4 though. Donald, I have Hughes throttle body and a 4-barrel throttle body that fits the M1. Oh, cool. Is the M1, I thought that they had one that was a 2-barrel specific and then one that was a 4-barrel. Does the length of a trumpet before the throttle body affect performance, and how does the length of trumpet affect it? It can. The length of the trumpet and really the length of the whole inlet track before the throttle body is all Helmholtz resonance. It's all basically the same. It's effectively plenum volume when the throttle is opening, and has a tuning effect. If you take a look at it, it seems to be more pronounced on 4-cylinder cars. Like when I did the testing on the Honda stuff, it was very receptive to changes in inlet tube. Like we ran long AEM ones and they made more power down low, and the short ones made more power up top. But when I tested recently, for instance, a bunch of lengths of tubing, a bunch of diameters of tubing on an LS on a truck manifold, and it was not very receptive at all to the changes in length of the tubing. You heard it here, Mopar guys. 318s rule them all. They rule the roost. Uncle Tony would be proud. Should I run a wideband to my carbureted engine? We always do. I haven't done 2-stroke mods that I can remember. The only one, I take that back. I've done one. I had a GoPed, and then we put a pipe on the GoPed, and then we measured the RPM change for top speed on the go bed with and without the pipe, and it picked up RPM and picked up top speed with when we put the pipe on. It was pretty fun. I also have a 2-stroke DT 125. How did I get rid of the haters? Pumps and hose. The 4-barrel has a step down to 2-barrel removable. Oh, okay. That's very cool. If you had to choose between a 408 stroker or a 496 big block Mopar stroker, which would you choose? Well, I think ultimately you're going to make more power with the bigger motor. I don't know what the weight difference is would be between a 408 360 base stroker, which I think is what you're talking about, and a 496 big block Mopar stroker. I think if I was doing a big block Mopar stroker, I don't think I would stop at 496. I think I would make it bigger than that. Yeah, Matt, I've seen the billet head and the crazy stuff going on down in Brazil with the 292. Oh, Noodles, yeah, that might be right. The 1.4 Civic might be a European one. I wasn't familiar. I didn't know that they made that. At least I hadn't seen one in the United States. Yeah, I've seen the new Copo Big Block Camaro. How could more back pressure on the GoPed make more horsepower? It doesn't. The pipe adds horsepower. Travis, I don't ever hook up the steam lines, and maybe I should. And it could be that we don't run them long enough for that to become an issue, and we run them very cold. So we're probably not getting near the limit of, the hot spots that might be created by that or solved by that. Do you still have your EG-HX? If you're talking to me, I've never had an HX. I had a VX, which, come on, get your story straight. And I don't have it anymore. I gave it to Chad Reynolds. If I prime the pump a couple of times, it's starting right up. If not, long crank time. Also check the fuel filter. Make sure that that's not clogged. But if you check pressure and the pressure stays there, or if the pressure comes up slowly and you have to turn it a bunch of times for the pressure to build up, I would check the fuel pressure or check the fuel filter. If it comes up fast and then goes down really fast, then I would check the stuff that Tim's talking about. I've never tested the early Falcon inline sixes. Is there an engine that you just despise? Yes, every one that breaks when I don't want it to break. And right now I despise every engine that I have that's all apart, which seems like all of them. Please do a test on a 390 stroke LS. I think it's better combo for skirt wear. That would be really hard to test skirt wear, though, unless we ran it for extended periods of time. It will make less power than a 4-inch stroke LS. I guarantee that, because it has so much less displacement. But maybe for skirt wear, it's better. And if you like the 390 stroke, then get the 390 stroke. They both work. I mounted a smog pump from a 1976 Chevy Love on a 3-horsepower mini bike and used a hose from the pressure side to the bridge carb. Not blow through rated, obviously. It did not do anything, but it looked cool. Yeah, it's hard to get that to work. Yep, we upgraded the pipe. We piped it just like you do on every 2-stroke. Has anyone ever been hurt by a dyno explosion? I have not been, luckily. I've never put turbos on a Hellcat. I've never, other than going over to Kenny Bell and seeing one, I don't know that I've ever been near one. Any chance of testing the newer Magnum trick flow heads? Those are the ones that I'd actually like to run, so I need to talk to them about that. Between a leak down and a compression test, you feel that one is more accurate at determining the condition of the motor. I like doing both, and I think that they kind of tell you different things. And one of the things I like doing with a leak down is I like doing it at different piston positions. Mostly we do it at the top, but if you test, like if you get a brand new LS3, for instance, a crate motor, which I've gotten before, and we test it with a piston at the bottom of the hole too, the leak down's really good on those factory things. I mean, it's really, really low on those factory things. Not so much on some of the other stuff that I've tested. And the other thing about a cranking compression test is that a cranking compression test when the motor's running so quickly that a lot of times, even if you're getting some blow by or leak down, it happens so fast that there's not a lot of time for that to actually happen. And we've had some that had bad, lower compression by 10 or 15 PSI, and even had bad leak downs that were 10 or 15%. And when the motor's running, it doesn't seem to notice it. Have you priced EGs in a while? They're like 6 times what they used to be. So now I gave Chad something that's worth 6 times what. Well, I gave it to him for nothing, so it was obviously worth more than that. What can we do to make this channel grow? I often ask myself that. I think better videos. I'm still learning how to do editing and stuff. Pretty soon, I have, you can see right over here, this is my new green screen. So pretty soon you guys will be having fancy green screen stuff. Are you going to test crossover pipe diameter sizing on a Magnum turbo? Probably not. That's probably not a good application for that. I would like to test it on an LS. AN06 fuel line big enough for 750 horsepower? Yes. Tim, I would like to test that L8T motor. I think that would be great. Shorty $99 eBay headers. It's a full length would be a cool comparison. What you're going to see is that the shorty headers, in all the testing that I've done, I've tested lots of shorty headers on small block Chevys and on big block Chevys and on small block Fords and on LSs. Shorty headers are typically about this much better than the stock exhaust manifolds, and the long tube headers are like this much better. So if that gives you any idea. Does it make sense that short rods suit low CFM head ports? See, I don't know. Maybe there's a theoretical argument that guys could make that, and they could show me the math that goes with that. But, and maybe if you were limited to having a specific head that had to have that flow, maybe you could adjust other things to try to optimize that. But for what we're doing, for what most people are doing, I don't think that that's going to be a good combination. So Anthony's saying the big block Chrysler is roughly 120 pounds heavier than an A small block Chrysler. Okay, so that's a big amount. So you have to make a lot more power. But I could see how a 528 big block would make a lot more. It's going to make 120 foot-pounds more than a 408 small block. Why haven't we seen a 4-cylinder bigger than 2.5? If you look under the hood of a Porsche 968, you will see one that is a 3-liter. And also the Starion was 2.6. So those are 2 examples where it's bigger than that. Both of those, by the way, have balance shafts in them, and so does the 2.5 and the Omni. Is it torque management that makes a drive-by-wire LS so lazy? Probably so. I don't remember driving one. My Silverado is the manual throttle body. Let's see. JYRE Killa had a good question. Oh, that was the head port and the rod ratio thing. The intake manifold I have is an M1 single plane EFI intake. You're welcome to borrow it. If you need headers, they're free. Thank you very much for the offer. I might take you up on that. This combination obviously does not want a single plane intake manifold right now. It definitely wants a dual plane. It's with a stock camshaft or even a mild camshaft that I put in it, a single plane is not going to be the answer. I mean, this thing is 4,300. It's, 15 or 1,600 RPM away from benefiting from a single plane. Ryan, the reason people don't run, Ryan's question was, have you tested a turbo engine running on alcohol or methanol with and without intercoolers to see the power difference? It seems like people running methanol don't usually run intercoolers. The reason that they don't do that is on drag race applications, when you're running methanol, the intercooler adds power. They know that it does, and they know that it drops the charge temperature by a lot. But they also know that it adds weight. And so what they're doing is balancing the amount of weight that they add and the reduction in ET in mile an hour versus the change in power. So if they put that on and it runs the same time and stuff, then they're just not going to use it. Keith, I'm fairly new at this. I mean, this is only my second year doing this, so the channel's growing. I'm very happy with how the channel's growing. Admiral's in the house. I'd love it if you tested more small cam, big head combos instead of the big head, big cam. I don't ever run big cams in almost anything. I mean, not comparatively speaking. We don't put solid roller cams in very many things other than big block Chevys, and they need to have those. I run a lot of hydraulic roller stuff in those too, but especially for driving around. But if you take a look at the LS stuff, if you take an LS3, for instance, and you put a small cam in an LS3, that's exactly what you're talking about there. But I like testing all of them. Like I've run the gamut on those. We run stock cams, truck cams, and then all the way through up to whatever the biggest cam, like that Comp 469, somewhere near 232, 233, or 234, or whatever at 50. The biggest cam that you could put with the available piston to valve clearance. So we have a spread of everything. And the interesting thing is, for a lot of those cams, like even that 469 cam, you pick up power everywhere. Maybe not at 1500, but I'm never at wide open throttle at 1500, so I'm not really concerned about that. But you pick up power everywhere compared to the stock cam, because honestly, that factory LS3 cam is not very good for low speed power. What do we use for a boost controller? Sometimes I use a manual controller that I have from TurboSmart or Turbo XS. I have this one, and this goes back like decades, the Turbo XS one. It's probably been used on more tests than any other manual controller in the history of manual controllers. The other one that we use on the dyno a lot now is the TC1 electronic controller, and that works good. How do you not get jaded and stay motivated? Dude, that even rhymes. That needs to be on a shirt. I love dyno testing, so that's my jam. So I got no problem staying motivated about that. Sometimes it's hard doing all of the videos all the time. Like, it'd be nice if I could do a video and it had like 8 or 10 million views, and then I could go, okay, I don't have to do a video every day. But, I like testing. Supposedly 4K quality causes the YouTube algorithm to distribute the channel more. So do I just need to upload them at a higher quality? Yeah, Dan, I'd like to see that information if you actually have back-to-back tests on rod lengths, and it's not. I've had people talk to me about rod length stuff, and everything that they talk about is, well, on this motor over here, it did this, and on this completely different motor over here, it did this. But here's why it did it, is because of the rod length. I've not seen anybody do an actual rod length change where that's all that they changed, because it's almost always something else. Even if something as simple as when you change the rod length, you have to change the weight of the piston and or the weight of the rod. Now, did that have an effect on what you were doing? Is that have more of an effect than the rod length and the dwell change and all that? So it's a lot of stuff. Any ideas on the cam swap specs for the 5.9? I don't know, something mild. I probably won't go bigger than a 224, 230 or something like that, I'm thinking. How much power do you think I'm losing with 1 3/4 headers over 1 7/8 or 2 on a 600 horsepower big block? I have to go back and look and see if I've run things that are that small. We picked up quite a bit of power when we were running. We were running small headers on it was a 454 in my 77 crew cab dually, and we picked up a fair bit going to a bigger header. And I think it was a 2 header that we eventually put on it. I'll see if I can go back and look up some of that data. Admit, Richard, do you like the back and forth of people? I do. That's why I do these live feeds. I like talking to the people. How about testing different heads on stock engines? I've done that a lot. I've tested, like, for instance, we ran ported LS3 heads on a stock LS3, and they only gain about 10 horsepower because it doesn't have the other thing that it really needs, in this case, a camshaft on that LS application. It doesn't have a camshaft to take advantage of what those heads can do. And the other thing that's in that particular instance, it already has more than enough head. It has enough cylinder head to make, we've made very close to 700 horsepower with a stock LS3 head. So it has enough head to support a ton of power. So more cylinder head is the last thing that it needs. And one with a stock camshaft makes it even worse. I know. What's up with the light quotient, yo? Yeah, Mike, back in the day, that was all the thing. The 400 rod was terrible, and the 5.7 rod was so much better. And then when the aftermarket started doing 6-inch rods, that's even better. CP Steve Miller, I don't know who that is, says he makes $1,800 a month on views with only 10,000 subscriptions. Got to step up your advertising game. Well, I don't do any extra promotion with. I've had people contact me and say, "Hey, we want you to schlep this stuff," and I haven't done any of that because I don't want to. I want the channel to be about something and not about me, trying to just make money off of it. Samantha, you'd like to see the effect of bigger heads on stock engines. They won't do very much. You can meet in the middle on the cam with the 227. I don't know, Aaron. That's the other thing I don't know on the Magnum, because I don't have a lot of experience with it. I don't know what the available piston to valve clearance is on the Magnum. If it's anything like the other Dodges and the piston's 25 feet down in the hole instead of being at top dead center, then we have a lot of room for camshaft, and then I might put something in there. All right. Good job, Jose. What's going on, man? Got any questions? A Patreon is definitely on the list of stuff that I'm going to do. And we have 2 minutes, so get your questions in. Money spoils things. Be nice to have a little bit of money. Would a 383 stroker crank fit into an Oldsmobile 350? I don't know if the bearings, I don't know if the mains are the same size on those. Because speed-seeking aliens help our channel. I'm thinking about branching out and doing other things too. But I am so busy doing what I'm doing that it's hard to do that too. Is it a myth that you need less timing with a longer stroke? My thinking is that it depends on the efficiency of the combustion chamber. Timing is related to a lot of things. One of them is the chamber design and efficiency. 4-valve heads typically need less timing because the centrally located spark plug doesn't take as long for the flame travel. How homogeneous the mixture, there's a lot of things that go into how much timing it wants. Bore size is kind of a critical thing too. Yeah, and money would help allow me to get more, do more dyno testing and do more elaborate things. And, how much horsepower do you think a 408 small block Chevy with a 671 will make? Well, if it's a really good 671 blower and the 408 is done right to take advantage of it, a 671 blower is about 1,000 horsepower blower. Some of the ones that we've done that are stripped and like from the blower shop, good ones, and you have 2 big carburetors on it and you're running 85 and all that. I think you could get to 1,000 horsepower. Aaron, pistons down 40 in the hole. That's it. That's pretty good for a Dodge. I'll send you it. It was my 318 Magnum. I didn't finish it and kept the cam. Enough money to make a Nova run. I hear you. Just hit over 600 horsepower on my engine dyno today with the 177 blower 383. That's cool. I have some 177 blower videos up. I think that they're up there. I know that I've done a bunch of testing with it. And I think we were trying to get to 700 with one to just try to spin the heck out of that little blower. And it may have been on a 383 because we wanted to do it on a fairly efficient motor so that we didn't have a really high boost level. And I'll have to go back and look. Now it makes me want to go back and look at the dyno data and see what's going on with that. Create a YouTube poll to ask who would sign up for Patreon. I will. That would be a good idea. I went over this early on last year when I was just getting started, and I have some good Patreon ideas for stuff that people could get. And one of them is a motor, and some of them are one-on-one discussions and things like that. So there's some good stuff and free swag because I've got a bunch of garbage here. Need to build and test an EMP-proof motor. That's not that hard, actually. The electronics portion of it is the only issue, and all you have to do is keep a spare set of points with you, and you're good. I believe Dulcich made 400 horsepower with a stock short block Magnum and a cam worth 550 lift. Lift doesn't really tell us much. The duration is kind of what we need because that's going to determine the power output of the cam. But that wouldn't surprise me. We do that with small block Chevys. So if you put like a Vortec head on it and a big enough cam and a good dual plane and a little magic and wizardry, 400 horsepower is definitely possible. Thank you very much. Is it Spakio? Please keep up the good work and make a Patreon. I'll pay $5 a month. Dude, I appreciate it, brother. Yep, 25 feet down the hole. That's like the slant 6 is like that. Let's see. Like to see a test on a 13-to-1 compression ratio. I think that Brian Tooley, the LT1 that they have, the Gen 5, is up over that. I can try it. I can see what 4K is. I've been filming all of this stuff on my camera. I mean, on my phone. I do have I have a Canon. I have more equipment to do it. It just takes a lot more time and stuff to set up, but I can certainly do it. Have you ever done any dyno runs on a Nissan KE, a KA24E? Not on the engine dyno. trying to think if we ran any on the chassis dyno. Maybe way back when I was doing stuff over at Powertrain and stuff, we may have done some of those. $3,800 versus $3,900. I just need to get the $3,800 running to begin with. How much horsepower does a Ramjet 502? I don't know. You can look up the rated power output from GM. .410 Windsor with AFR 205s, 575 horsepower possible. Yeah, Mike, take a look at the video I have up on the 408 Windsor that we did. It takes a pretty good sized camshaft, and we ran a single plane on it, and we ran trick flows, I think, on that one. But a 205 airflow is certainly possible. That head flows more than enough to make 575. Limiting factor for a cam and a Magnum is, valve retainer to guide clearance. Okay, yeah, we'll have to look at that. We'll have to look at all of that. Andy, do you think messing with peanut port heads is a waste of time? I don't. I like doing stuff with those because nobody ever expects them to do well, and we've done some stuff with some ported versions. I'd like to try to get to 500 with one of those. It would be kind of interesting. I'm a little late to the party. Can you talk about using the Holley HP with a Magnum? Did you use the factory crank sensor and gear? We did not. We used a distributor and just ran it off a MSD distributor. What is a good compression ratio to take advantage of E85 over gas? You just add boost. The piston flip better make some gains. Oh, Dan, I still want to see a budget. I hope at least you got to put the budget in air quote. 3.3 liter Porsche turbo build, a bunch of cam swaps. It's about $1 million project there. Derm, what's up? Thank you very much. My 396 had 11-to-1 domes, fully ported oval ports. If the Mopar 5.2 is the best engine ever invented by man, the moon landings were fake. Wow, throwing shots out. Here's something I am looking for. So if you guys know, I have to get going now, but let me know. I'm looking for, I think I know where the pistons are available for a 1970 454 LS6. I'm going to build a reproduction of one of those. I found some 291 heads. Camshaft, I need to find a reproduction of the camshaft. GM might still sell that. Comp has a version, I think, but it's not as exact as I want it to be. Also, the intake manifold, I need to check. Westech might have one of the Snowflake aluminum 4-barrel intake manifolds. The carburetor is easy to get, but if you guys know anybody that has any LS6 stuff, please let me know, and send it to my email, and I put that up there. So make sure to let me know. I want to do that, and what I want to do is build a duplicate of one of those, like I did with the 327 and the 302 and the 350 stuff. I want to do a big block one, and since I was working with the guys from Boston Racing Engines, James said he has a set of the 291 heads that he will let me borrow, that I could put a motor together and find out what that motor actually made in stock trim. And then and specifically on the big block, I want to, we did this on an L72 on a 427, on a 425 horse 427, but it wasn't exactly stock. But we did a comparison between the stock exhaust manifolds and long tube headers, and it's a lot. So I want to do that test also on an LS6. So we want to run the factory ones and then run, long tube headers like we run when we're on the dyno. But I got to get going, guys. Thank you for showing up. I will be back tomorrow, and we'll have another video up. So if you have not already, make sure to go check out the Dodge one and send it to all of your Dodge friends. And if you have any good Dodge groups or anything that I need to be part of, please send that over to me, and I will. Yeah, the Holley is a 780 vacuum secondary. We probably won't use a vacuum secondary, and if we do, we'll we'll tie it so it's a mechanical secondary, which is typically what we do on those. But make sure to send me any good groups that you want me to be part of. And because I want to get more Dodge information out there, you know, we got to have the Dodge guys taking a look, and because they don't get as much love as the LS guys or even the small block Chevy guys. So thanks for showing up. I will see you guys tomorrow.